Welcome everybody, my name is Gayle and I'm a producer in the video games industry. Been around for too long, but that's enough about that. Welcome to this panel about autism and the games industry and celebrating neurodiversity. I'm joined by four lovely people today, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But so on the first on the list, we've got Jade Hall-Smith.
Hello.
Then we have Dr. Brett Heasman.
Hi.
Then we have Helen Carmichael.
Hello.
And then Dominic Shaw.
Hey.
Cool. And then, so if we do the introductions in reverse order, starting with you, Dominic.
Hi there, everyone. So, as just said, my name is Dominic Shaw. I'm currently the office manager, both physically and virtually, for UKIE, which is the video games only trade body. And basically what UKIE does is promote how good and amazing the industry is to MPs and policymakers, while also representing the games industry to those people so that better policies and activities can occur. Along with that, I've been in the industry for around almost 5 years now, just in and out of different jobs. Before that, I did 5 years of higher education, learning about games design and development. So I've almost been a decade in, so it's quite weird to say that, but yeah, that is me.
Great.
Thanks, Dominic.
So I'm Dr. Brett Heasman. I'm from the Centre for Research in Autism and Education at UCL, and I manage the DARE project, which is funded by Autistica, and DARE stands for Discover Autism Research and Employment. And I'm also very interested in video games. I've done research on autistic people playing video games together and how that's used to build friendships and really good rapport. So I'm really glad to be here and part of this panel discussion.
Hello, I'm Helen Carmichael. I'm a game developer. I work from home from a small indie company called Grey Alien Games. I was basically not diagnosed as autistic until about 3 or 4 years ago. I'm also a mum of 2 teenagers, one of whom is also autistic. And yeah, I do outreach work for Autistica Play, and previously I was a writer and editor. So that's a bit about me.
Hi everyone, I'm Jade. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 26. I'm 29 now. I do some games from home in my spare time. I've created a game about autism called Natural Tone, and I studied I studied games design at university 2 years ago, and I've done digital art in the past. So I combined my passion for disability advocacy with games design, and I usually make games that are narrative experiences about autism, disability and mental health.
Brilliant, fantastic. Well, thanks a lot, folks. Cool. So yeah, we've got a set couple of questions to go through, and I just wanted to be really topical off the bat. This horrible virus is going around, and the reason why we're all stuck inside, not seeing many people. I've been seeing crazy things on social media about Animal Crossing, and loads of people connecting, not even just direct friends, just strangers too. I love it. I think it's amazing. So I just kind of want to ask, have games helped any of you during the lockdown, or how else are you coping? And I'm going to direct that at Helen.
All right. Well, there's a couple of different things going on there. On the one hand, I'm trying to ship a video game myself at the moment called Ancient Enemy. It's out on April the 9th. Everybody should wishlist it right now on Steam. And apart from that, so yeah, I'm really working very hard on that. I'm doing a lot of testing and so on. So I haven't been able to do much kind of social gaming myself. However, everybody else in the family, particularly my 2 teenage sons, one of whom is unexpectedly home from university, the other one who's had his GCSEs unexpectedly cancelled, are really using it kind of gaming as a lifeline to socialize with their friends, girlfriends and so on. And they're keeping in touch with lots of different groups of friends. Some of the things they're doing are very constructive. So they're doing projects together, like building Minecraft realms and things like that. Other things are, you know, all different sorts of games they're playing basically, and talking about and sharing that online and using that as kind of a good way of hanging out and maybe talking about some of their other concerns and worries and things that they're missing out on in their social lives, because they've both got quite busy social lives normally. From my point of view personally, as I said, I haven't particularly been playing group games myself because I haven't had a lot of time, but I have been keeping in touch with a group of other local game developers who are all indies like myself. We're not part of big organizations, we're not in big cities, so we don't keep up to date with sort of social events or sort of support events that much, so we make our own support network, which normally we would meet in cafes or pubs fairly regularly. So now we're doing that online on Zoom meetings like this, and I admit I was a little bit hesitant the first time I did it, of trying to speak with a large group of people at once and how that would work, but actually it worked really well, and it was really nice to see their faces. And I think from the point of view of all our kind of well-being and mental health and chance to have a good grumble about things or talk about what we're working on and so on, or things that are going on in the industry, in jokes, whatever, I think it's really healthy, and it was a really nice thing to do.
And I guess just to say, maybe you, Dom, do you have regular video calls with everyone else in the office, or is everyone just like heads down doing their own bits of work and stuff? So
now that we are virtual, we have set up camp on Microsoft Teams, and in UKIE we have various teams. So we have a mini team meeting first, and then we have a whole UKIE meeting afterwards for like the first hour in the morning, like from 9 to 10. So then we can all know what we're doing, kind of help each other if there's anything that we're doing that could cross over with others, and just generally be like, oh, hey, don't see your face anymore. What's bringing you around here? So yeah, that's what we are currently doing at the moment.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, it's business as usual for me. Like, I'm just on my own in my office anyway, so this is great. Moving on then, I wanted to ask another question. So, in general, like, what does neurodiversity bring to the games industry? And I want to direct that at Jade.
Well, I think that it's great to have a neurodiverse workplace, because obviously everybody brings their own unique gifts and skills, and not only can you bring something, but you can gain something as well. So some person is very good at organizing, but someone else is very good at communicating with others and giving presentations. Then you can work together and everyone's comfortable in what they're doing. So it's very good to have like loads of different people in there. And even like I work from home, and I haven't, for various reasons, I haven't been able to really do much game designing myself, and I've recently gotten back into it. And both me and my partner are both autistic, and there's things that I'm very, very good at, and there's things that she's very, very good at, and because obviously we're able to focus on what each other are good at, we're able to do really good projects together. So I'm good at hyper focusing on things and being organized and planning and everything, but I'm not very good at structuring, things sequentially, and also I'm not very good at a few other things. So that's just one example, and you can imagine if you're in a small indie studio, or even in a larger one, that if you've got so many different people, whether they're neuro diverse or atypical or whatever terms you're using, you have loads of different people who are good at different things, and you're learning and gaining from each other. And it's great because you get to have so many new exciting games and so many different unique looks and stories behind each and every game. So that's what I think which is great about neurodiversity.
Awesome. Okay. So what I'm really interested in is over the last year or so, where I've been kind of what's the word, not paying attention to, but I guess as considerations around autism has been more brought to my attention. There's definitely a synergy between video games and autism, and I just wanted to ask you, Brett, because I know you did some research for Xbox with this. What are your thoughts on that? Like, why is there such a synergy between video games and autism?
Sorry, just remember to unmute myself. So, yeah, absolutely. There is an interesting synergy. I got involved in doing research on Xbox gaming between autistic people, but by chance, actually. I was actually working in a charity doing another study when I noticed that the natural activity for a vast number of the members that were part of this charity was to take part in the Xbox gaming. And when I sort of entered the Xbox room, because there's a separate PlayStation room and an Xbox room, but when I went into the Xbox room, the interaction was struck me as a psychologist, as someone who's studied social interactions, as incredibly diverse, incredibly sophisticated. You know, you had players who were taking the perspectives of characters in the game. They were taking the perspectives of other players who were virtually connected to the game, as well as taking each other's perspective of the other player who was co-present with them. And you had this incredible sense of banter, the ability to sort of use these kind of subcultures associated with gaming, whether it's films or animations or voices that particular characters have had, to relate to the situation in very diverse ways. And the consequence was always building fantastic rapport and humor. So I found that very interesting as well. As someone, you know, you read the clinical literature on autism and it says that autistic people generally don't have social motivation, that they're not good at building friendships. And none of this was true. You know, what I was seeing was incredibly sophisticated social relationships built through the activity of gaming. And I think, you know, that's what's so fantastic about gaming, is it gives us more alternative ways of connecting with each other. Yes, it was a really good study to do, and it's really good to highlight that you know, autistic people can have these fantastically varied and colourful interactions around the activity of gaming. Well, I think you're muted.
You're
Des.
muted, Des.
Sorry. You got it in my head, Brett. You got it in my head.
Yeah, I did.
So I'd like to direct that same question to you, Dom.
Yeah, so I think why gaming and autism have such synergy is because, like, from saying it from my personal experience, because something I didn't say in my little intro is I have been diagnosed with autism, but also dyslexia since I was a baby, while dyslexia I didn't find out until I was in college. But I feel that video games is such an engaging visual medium that most of the time, like, it's really hard to explain sometimes, but when you got so much energy or you don't really connect with the world around you, you have this intense focus and you connect to something. And I think video games is such a medium where you either get a game like an RPG, which creates this entire world that grabs your focus and you really attach to it, or because you're so proactively thinking, because there's enough engagement and interaction in games, choice decisions, actions and so on, that someone on the spectrum, I feel that I can just pick it up so well, because with a movie you're just watching it, you're just being told about it, or games you're exploring and you're really making an impact on what's in front of you and having that input and output right there and then.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, thanks for that. So I've got another question for Helen. So I just want to pick up on what Brett mentioned in his answer. So I just, what are some of the ways that autism is represented in gaming, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, we've had this sort of interesting discussion about this previously with some of the panelists, and some people were trying to throw out their ideas of game characters, perhaps, who would represent an autistic person or have particular autistic traits. And actually, I asked my autistic son this earlier as well. I said, what's an autistic game character? And he said, I don't know, which ones are supposed to be autistic? And I said, yeah, good question. Are there any that any of your friends think are particularly? He's very open. He games with some autistic friends. Quite a lot of his friends are either autistic or neurodivergent in some other ways. And he was like, really like Nair. And I was like, no, I don't think there are any that I've played either that I would really finger as being individually autistic. However, there's all kinds of characters and all kinds of scenarios that perhaps represent autistic interests or autistic traits. So I think just to sort of unpick that a little bit, autistic people are really different. I think very often when people think about autism, it's getting a bit technical, but when you talk about diagnosis, you know, you've got like a line like that, and you think this person at this end is really autistic, you know, by what people consider to be really autistic. Perhaps they have trouble speaking, perhaps they're very anxious, they can't go outside, you know, they've got really big social problems, they're very, very sensitive to lots of things. And this person over here is like your sort of normal person, you know, who doesn't have any of those problems and can do all those things easily. But when you actually meet autistic people, it's not like that at all. We're kind of like, if you think of a wheel with spokes poking out of it, and each of those spokes is a different sensitivity or ability or area of expertise or area of difficulty. That's much more what it's like. So, you know, anybody you get in a game who's super interested in something and really knows a lot about it, massive expertise, that's an autistic trait. Somebody in a game who has real difficulty communicating, that's an autistic trait. But likewise, you know, I'm hyperlexic, I talk too much. So, you know, maybe somebody, maybe somebody who could read when they were really young, like I could, and uses really long words and doesn't stop talking. Maybe they're autistic. So I just think if anybody's sort of scared of thinking about the idea of someone in their game possibly being autistic or having autistic traits or worried about offending somebody, I'd say, you know, just talk to some autistic people. We're all different. We're all completely different, you know, among my friends who are autistic or my relatives, all very different in their sensitivities, interests, communication. You know, we've all technically got some impairment in one of those areas or a very spiky profile that makes ordinary life challenging, but, you know, how each individual person is represented is going to be very different. So that was a very long answer. I hope that makes sense to people. But, you know, the summary is we're all different, and talk to us and ask us, you know, yeah.
I love that answer. I think it's great. And I guess, so it's just sparked something off in my head. You know, I speak to a lot of developers about making diverse games, however you slice that. But the challenge is, we're just like, well, do you call stuff out? Like, obviously there's visible diversity things you can do, but for like not obvious, as you very eloquently put, like, how do we handle that as a community, like as game developers? Do we just have someone who has a couple of those traits and just leave it like that, or do we call them out? Like, because I'm just like, well, if you do that, you've kind of just softened the point.
Well, I was gonna make a point of Senua's Sacrifice by is it Ninja Theory, that's it. Because I went to GDC and I saw one of their talks about it. This was like 2 years ago when I was still a student. It's really inspiring because like they obviously went to the grassroots and they worked with charities, and not just charities about the mental health. They actually spoke to people who had psychosis and had mental health issues. And I think they were, as far as I know, one of the first people who've actually done, like, been daring enough to make a game about a serious issue that's actually not just an indie game, but has kind of like gone out of the box in that sense, because most people know about it. Sometimes you do an indie game, like for instance my game on autism, or you do another game that's a narrative and it's really strong, but not many people know about it unless, you know, you really promote it. But this is the first game that kind of people know about, and it was sold through Xbox and I think other platforms, if I remember correctly. But anyway, they basically worked with people who had the conditions, and it was really great to see that. I mean, this could be something that people start doing in their own games about autism or about other mental health or anything like that, because now there's a really strong argument for diversity in main characters in games. Like Life is Strange, you had like, you know, female relationships, two women being together. You have other games which promote diversity in some sort of another. So I think it's starting to become more of a thing. It just needs to be done in a very sensitive way, and people are starting to want to do that.
Good. Thank you. That's good. What looks good here? I guess. I mean, so yeah, I guess a continuation of that then. I guess, have there been any games that have had an impact on you, or you've heard about having an impact on the autistic community that other game developers could learn from? And I want to pitch that at Dom first.
I mean, it's really hard for me to know, because obviously, as Helen pointed out, everyone's so different, so they come in at different aspects. But I think in terms of thinking as a community-wise, I think Minecraft is a very accessible game to the general autism community, because I've seen so many like parent groups where they talk about like, oh, I set this group up for my child with autism and his friends, and they absolutely love it, and they come together and play, and they really get along and just create together. So from that aspect, I think Minecraft's a wonderful game, and any game similar to it. In terms of my own experience, I'd probably say Mass Effect. It's old now, but for me, like along with like impacting my whole career in terms of a social level, so before Mass Effect, I would generally just go to school, do it, and then go home and play video games. But after playing Mass Effect and really trying to relate to characters and actually see some of the signs and, you know, some of these social cues that were in the game, I actually learned from that and then was able to apply it to my own experiences. So I was able to actually interact with people better. So for me, any game that has a really in-depth conversation system or some sort of mixture of like body language, social cues, and so on is really impactful, because for someone like me who in real life, I go up to someone, I fail at the conversation, that's it, the conversation's done. Well, with Mass Effect, I could always just like replay it, redo it, learn, absorb, and implement. I was going to say regurgitate, but that's a really bad word.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for that. That's great. And I guess I want to kick that over to Brett as well. So when you're doing your research previously with the dev stuff, like, were there any particular games that regularly sprung up, or does everyone just play normal games?
There we go, mute. Yes, Mass Effect was one. Overwatch was another one. I tried to provide a range of different games to play. There was Lego Batman, which was quite fun because you have to work together to build things. There was Call of Duty as well, was really popular. But I think, the one that was really interesting actually was Assassin's Creed, because it's a one-player game, and you'd think that's not a social game, but what often happened is you'd have one player using it, but then several other people sort of living the game viscerally and giving commentary and suggestion and advice, and so everyone in the room's actually kind of coordinated via one avatar through the game, and I found that really interesting as a dynamic as well, because you wouldn't think a one-player game could be such a social event, but it was. So yeah.
Yeah, I would just chip in and say I really agree that about the one-player games, especially what I've seen within my own family and our own friends. Sometimes we'll hook up online with somebody to play a game and play, like you're saying, a multiplayer game. But other times you invite people round, but again, like playing the game together, the single-player game or whatever, is sort of your excuse to get together. So it's a good sort of social meeting point or a starting point for conversation and so forth. And if you end up talking about other things along the way, great. But if you can't think of anything else to talk to, or you're stuck for a topic, you've got the game there, and that's a good thing for you to always be chatting about, and you feel like you've got that common interest. So I think that's really important.
Brilliant, thank you. Jade, anything to round it off?
Oh, well, I like playing games online, but I didn't really used to like doing that, because I always used to feel like it was a way of people like giving abuse to others. It wasn't until like my friend moved away, and that was the way of communicating, playing games. But even then I was a bit reluctant to join games where it wasn't just me and my friend. But I started to realize like quite quickly that actually you can play games online. It could be used as a social medium to make friends that you like all around the world, and places that you wouldn't normally make friends, like, you know, make like games where you work together, or even when you're going against people, or teams against teams. So it's a lot of ways you can, you know, communicate with others. And if I go back to the Minecraft point, like sandboxing games are really cool, because quite often it's like become a thing of people think people with autism don't have imagination, and that's a great way of, you know, exploring imagination and making stuff and being in your own world and creating new worlds and everything. So that's great. I personally like playing multiplayer games with my partner. We've got 3 different consoles, so we've got a range of different games we're able to play, old and new, and it's a way of, you know, working together, or bringing each other together, and playing, you know, communicating with each other and having fun. Puzzle games and games where you have to work together, like to come up with new ideas, are a great way of building relationships with others too.
Brilliant. Awesome. Thank you very much for that. Cool. No, it's really good. I think that, yeah, it's a good place for us to kind of maybe do some future gazing. And I guess the general question is where do you see gaming and neurodiversity converging? Like, you know, what's the future for us as an industry in the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years? I'm going to point that at Brett.
I don't know. Do you want to point it to someone else first, or I'll say?
All right. Let's pick one there. Let's do Helen.
Okay. I find that a bit of a difficult question to answer.
It's a horrible question.
I think, yeah. I mean, I just think this is really interesting what's happening now. More and more people who haven't been used to working online are now working online. They're communicating online, where previously they might have insisted on a face-to-face business meeting or something like that, and they're having to think differently. And this is sort of anecdotal, but what I'd say from my own experience and experience of autistic friends is that we already think differently, right? So we've maybe already tried these things, or if communicating one way didn't work, we've already tried something else. So I think if you want to sort of think about different ways of working and include people, I'm hoping, you know, trying to be positive here, that this sort of strange quarantine experience that everyone's had might make people start thinking about different ways of communicating with each other and different ways of helping each other. So taking that back to the industry, when everybody gets back together again, be that in their offices or whether they've now decided they can all work from home from now on and they never really needed an office in the first place or whatever, I'm just hoping people are going to be a little bit more mindful of that, people's different ways of communicating, different ways of contributing. And that, I think, having that environment of including everybody and allowing them to communicate at their own speed in the way that suits them. And also very nicely what we're doing here, we're all taking turns and making sure everybody gets heard because of the way that the technology is set up. You know, everybody knows from kind of management theory or whatever, that's always the quiet person in the back of the office meeting. The good manager asks them, well, hang on a minute, have you got anything to add, John, or whatever? Because they're the ones sitting there having the really great ideas, but they're an introvert, so they're not pushing them forward. That's, you know, it's just like, it's normal stuff that's true for everybody. But I think it can particularly help neurodiverse people. And when you've got more neurodiverse people or people thinking about those different ways of communicating, making games, you're going to start getting more variety and more different things to think about, more imaginative avenues are going to be followed eventually. It'll take time, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got something to quickly say. I was just going to say that I personally think this whole what's happening right now is a great way, like what Helen said, is a great way of people seeing how different life can be when you have to be or think differently, like your routine changes, because I personally, I feel fine with it because I'm like this anyway. But I know a lot of people are just like really anxious about how they can't go out and they can't do certain things. And I think that being able to communicate in a more accessible way, which you could probably do even before this all happened, is great. And if I kind of think back to like, for instance, when I was at uni, a lot of my projects involved having to work with other people, which was particularly difficult with me working in groups. And I did very well on all of the things where I had to work by myself, but working in groups was very hard. So maybe this is a new way of thinking for people. And what I really enjoyed studying particularly is looking at how games help disabled people or people who are in hospitals. And there's been so many great advances on things, and that's what I'd like to see in 3 to 5 years, is like games to improve mental health, improve physical conditions. I've had lots of anxiety in the past and presently, and games has always like been something that I use as a way of storytelling how I'm feeling, or social issues around the world, or things that directly affect me or other people. And there's been games that I've researched, like games that augmented reality, for instance, that help autistic children to talk to other people and communicate and to share and play together in a way that is helping the autistic child, but also the child without autism, because they're able to, you know, see things from a different point of view, because they're working together. Or games where you're, you know, I think there were some games with people who were having chemotherapy, and they were playing these games as a way of, you know, lifting their spirits a little bit. This was VR games or augmented reality games. So games could be used for all different purposes, communicating with others around the world, improving your mental or physical health and everything like that. So I would like to see that, and I'd like to see how people change their views after the whole pandemic is over as well.
Yeah, cool. And over to you, Dom.
5 years, yeah. So for me, I would definitely say, like, absolutely both. To be fair, most of what I was thinking of for the 5 years was what both Jade and Helen said. The only thing I can think to add is I hope that people, like, thinking about this experience now, I hope people kind of go and, like, taking that kind of point that Helen said, that about people, everyone feels acknowledged and said. I hope people, especially developers within their games, kind of think more about that kind of aspect. Like, am I creating a character that's not meeting a tick box, but more expressing a different worldview and really making an in-depth character and really representing different people? Because, like, for example, like, I've been looking at the chat, which like, loving the chat right now. Like, some people have mentioned, you know, and Helen mentioned earlier, what kind of characters are actually on the spectrum, and open about that. And I think, although it's definitely important not to also highlight that and just have diverse and a range of characters, I think for younger kids to kind of see like an almost idol, like, oh, there's this character who's autistic, they're accepted, they're doing all this stuff in the world, I think that is much more needed in games. So better representation. So not for the older players, but more for the younger players who, you know, you don't want to develop a toxic mindset, and it always starts young. So if you develop a positive mindset by adding so many different diverse characters and just making sure that maybe there's a few that are highlighting that they're like autistic or something, and then, you know, there might be that one kid that goes, actually, I can relate to that character and they have the same thing as me, and, you know, they can really go from there and kind of explore themselves through the medium of games, if that makes sense.
It totally does. Brett, did everyone else do a good job for you, or you got anything to add?
They did an incredible job. Yeah, they covered everything.
Awesome. All right. Cool. So I guess we're on the backside of this now. But a question for you. What I wanted to ask is there anything that the games industry can do to help you get more data, for your research?
Yes, so the research I've been doing is that it's longitudinal research, and that's really important because we need to understand people's journey into employment, during employment, and out of employment when they look for more opportunities. And we've had two main ways in which we've gathered data. One is through our public survey, which anyone can take. And the other is when we've built specific relationships with particular companies that want to understand more about neurodiversity within their organization. So in terms of, we have participants from a very wide variety of sectors, but gaming is something that we would really like to understand a lot more about. And so we can share a link for getting involved in the research I've been doing. It'd be great if people could contribute and take part and encourage others to take part as well. I think, one of the things I'm very excited about is the potential to learn about things that are happening within the gaming sector that can be transported from there to other sectors, because I do believe that it's ahead of the curve on many things. And I think there's an opportunity there to have some really good transmission of ideas for how to create enabling and meaningful employment environments for autistic people.
Brilliant. And I guess just to open this up to everybody else, so I know that you're all involved in Autistic Play, and I've been fortunate to go to a couple of, shall I call them fringe events, and so it's been, we're pretty much a year on now. So I just wanted to. Oh, sorry about that.
That newscaster with the children.
Yeah. Work from home Zoom experience.
Oh,
I'm surprised I haven't got my cats walking along near the webcam and like any cats around here. I've got lots of cat hairs like floating up towards me, but no cats, so that's good.
Oh man, sorry, I apologise. Just wondered. Basically, I think it's been roughly a year now. So could you kind of maybe highlight a couple of activities that you've done over the last year through Autistica Play? I mean, because for me, given Brett's need for data, like this could be something that, it's a bad word, but there's a lot of synergy, right? So through these events and activities that you do, you can help educate the rest of us, about autism and the need for this data. I'm going to pick on cat hair, Jade.
So I was so busy taking the cat hairs off, I didn't hear the full part of the question. Sorry.
Sorry. So this question basically is about retrospective of Autistica Play over the last year. About activities that you.
Oh, okay. Yes. So Autistica Play has been great because personally, I know from experience that the game industry is great and it's amazing, and I love it in particularly the indie games studios and developers, because from me asking things on Twitter or asking for support, they've all been really supportive. It's like a little small community that are really into helping each other and working and sharing resources, so that's been great. But I've also been very overwhelmed with traveling from to different events and socializing and networking, and anyone who knows me knows that I'm very, I wouldn't really say introverted, because once you know me, I won't shut up. But I would say that it's really difficult for me to form relationships and talk to new people if I don't really know them. So, I mean, I went to Train Jam, I went to GDC, and I went to quite a few other events, and it was amazing. I learned so much, but it was a lot of anxiety for me, and traveling and talking to people and stuff like that. So working with Autistica Play has been great because I know the challenges that some people with autism might face, and I want to change that, and we've wanted to change that, so that if you're a developer or you want to be in the games industry, we're making it more accessible for people to join that, or people who are already in the game industry, making it more accessible. So Xbox studio called Rare invited me to one of their studios to talk about accessibility. They asked me about how to make their games more accessible, what I would like to see from games in general, the console, everything. It was great because I've never been invited to a studio to be a consultant. I felt very important. And like just a few examples of people just messaging me and asking me like, how can we make things more accessible? And not just me as an autistic woman, but someone with who's blind, like my friend who's blind also went to this event. People who have mobility issues or physical impairments, so they're getting a big scope of disability and how they can make things more accessible. I also went to Games Accessibility Conference, and GDC also had like little sections on games controllers, how to make games accessible. People are starting to be better at making quiet rooms and digitalizing things. So it's been great doing that. And obviously I've been doing some fundraising. I attempted to do some streaming to raise some money for Autistica, which was great because that again helped me with my own anxiety, doing something I've never done before and getting out of my comfort. So I'm giving stuff to Autistica, but I'm also gaining a lot from like breaking the boundaries of what I've had to endure as a games developer in something that's not very accessible. I'm breaking those boundaries, but I'm also breaking my anxiety levels a bit by trying new things and kind of like going out there and telling people how to make things more accessible and whatnot. So it's been great.
Fantastic. And how about you, Helen?
Well, I can think of some sort of concrete things that we've done over the last year. So we've actually done quite a lot, really. Now I'm looking back on it. I mean, I started off turning up to an event at the BFI last year where I met Jake, and I literally met Jake and chatted to him in the corridor because the Mixer event was too stressful for me. So that's kind of an example of the type of thing where even an event about accessibility can be less accessible, you know what I mean? And this is part of the learning experience. And I wouldn't say to people running events, you know, I wouldn't be mean to them about that, but it's really good to have people who feel empowered to then say, by the way, did you know this was a problem for me and for these other people as well? And, you know, the deaf people, the autistic people, blah, 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 who attended this event. It would be really great if next time, can you think of another way of doing it? And so that was just like the starting point for me. I didn't have much idea about what Autistica Play was. I just was a couple of years diagnosed as autistic. I worked in the games industry. I wasn't really doing anything sort of advocacy wise or putting myself out there or knowing even what to do. So I thought, well, I'll turn up to this event and see if it gives me any ideas of what, you know, if I could be of help to anybody or not. You know, I have no idea. And then, yeah, I mean, since that, I've been tweeting about it. It's given me sort of a hook to speak to people more openly at games related events about autism, that yeah, there's this thing going on and there's people you can contact and we might be organising some events, or there might be a stream, or you might be able to raise some money for it, and so on and so forth. So that's like it's good to have a concrete hub that people, there's me being literal there, I'm thinking about a concrete hub now, like a hubcap. Sorry, that's autism brain. Anyway, there's been streamers raising money. We've had a sort of accessible game jam, which was really interesting and had loads of really amazing games actually were made, and we had more time to make it. It was all done online. Some of the ideas that came out of that, I mean, people were just saying before, we want to see more representation. Please do check out, I'm sure it's available on the Autistica Play website, please do check out those games, because some of them, they're so different and so mind-blowing, even if they're, you know, only a week's work in how they approach, from very heavy games, you know, sort of about mental health, right through to really fun, playful games that would be suitable for a young child, all sorts. So I really would recommend you go and look at those. Personally, I was really pleased to be invited up to Autistica and have some of my experiences, lived experiences, recorded by a woman called Shu Hay, who's been making a game called Disconnected. It was part of her studies, and she's autistic as well. And that was very specifically about people's experiences of autism, including communication, but also sort of clumsiness and physical issues. So, you know, I feel really privileged to have been part of that. And I think she's done a really great job on that. And, you know, if you hear about Disconnected's the name of the game, look it up. So, yeah, I feel like we're doing really well. And I think it's only been a year, but it seems as if quite a lot of things have happened. And the more people we talk to about it and the more we do events like this, the more hopefully other people will hear about it and either contribute something or else they'll come up with new questions and new ideas that we can look into and figure out new things.
Okay. And then over to Dom. So I remember watching a talk from you at, what was it? I think it was the Best Place to Work Awards, where you're giving us some tips basically on, you know, just how to make just every day more bearable for people with autism. What are your other thoughts for the rest of the year?
I mean, like on that, I think Jake's already said this in the previous webinar, the first webinar, but it's like I did that talk just giving, they're called the 10 game changers. So I just gave simple, practical tips to everyone in the audience of how they can affordably and effectively impact neurodiverse and autistic people's work experience. And one of them was flaps, and I didn't tell people to do it, but once I got to the end of my talk, everyone just did it, and I was just like, oh my God, people
awesome.
listened.
Yeah, that was awesome.
So that was amazing. But in terms of my overall year with Autistic Play, just like Helen, I jumped aboard literally on the day of the event. I was just because obviously some of you guys who were on that panel last year are here. I'm just going to say it here. It's just like when I walked in that room and saw you guys and everyone else on that panel, it's just like, that's a diverse panel. It's not all white guys, old, and it's like we've got a mixture of ages, mixture of backgrounds, of all sorts. And I'm just like, this is what we need more of. And if this is event number one, I need to be a part of it and help spread the word. So I was just like, get me aboard this train. So I literally, I think that my first activity was helping Jake with the Guildford Game Festival, which was also its first year that Yuki helped with. So now I'm a part of Yuki. I can be like, yeah, Guildford Game Festival. But wow. I helped with that. And then I say my next major event was Develop. So Jake was on holiday, so I took the reins of just getting as much Autistica activity at Develop. So I did a few interviews, some of which can be watched. I'll pass Jake the links to those if he wants to pass them later. I'm just blanking on them right now. That's where I also met Helen for the first time and met some of the other ambassadors. And I just spread the word. I went around, and on the Wednesday of Develop, I helped do my first fundraiser with a company called Studio Gobo, and Keyword Studios, who are a big organization that have Electric Square and Studio Gobo part of them. And basically at their party at Develop, they were like, we're happy to have you partner with us to be our charity partner. And on that night, I helped them raise £200 for Autistica, so that was amazing. And then, along with doing my talk at the Best Awards, I also did a company. I did an article with the talk and posted it online, and the amount of feedback I've received from it is really good. Like on day one, a young guy called Lewis, who was also on the spectrum, he reached out to Jake, who then told me, and then I reached out to Lewis, and he was just like, I absolutely love this article, can I do a blog post about it? And I was just like, yes, let me pick my brain of how I can help you and everything. And it's like the other day as well, it's like an organization, I think in Germany, I hope it's Germany, otherwise I've just totally mislabeled them. But this organization it's on my Twitter at Dominic Shaw 94 if you want to see the reference. But anyway, this organization, they posted about my article yesterday, and they were just like, loved it. And I looked at the English posting of it, and it was like a few views, Then I looked at the German posting event, it was like already like 30 likes and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, it's going global now. No, but yeah, I think, so from my perspective, it's very events driven, but from this experience, I'm kind of learning and grasping some of the more digital aspects, just like Helen said, but more the streaming, especially Retro Princess, who needs to shout out. I mean, raising that much money for Autistica was amazing. And then, as Jade said, it's a conversation starter. So instead, like, even for myself, like, I'm still, sometimes you go to an event and you're just like, what can I do? And then you're just like, okay, Autistica is in my head. Let's see if I can make a conversation. Bada boom, ding. So it's not only helping the whole industry, I feel, become more aware of neurodiversity and autism, but it's also helping me that helps Autistica. So overall, it's like they would say in Lion King, the circle of life.
Brilliant. So I guess just a quick note to everyone in digital land. We'll be taking some questions after this next question. So yeah, if you haven't done so yet, if you just post in the chat, or if you use hashtag AutisticAPlay on Twitter, we'll try and answer as many as we can after this. But yeah, so I guess kind of we're to round up with you, Jake. You know, also you kicked off this program, and yeah, I've been seeing amazing things, and obviously what everyone's just recounted. So you know, it's World Autism Awareness Month this month, and I know you guys are working on a lot of resources. So can you just wrap up with that and let us know where we can get them, basically?
Hello. Sure. Okay. You can hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, firstly, I just want to say, like, the ambassadors have been, you probably heard my cat there. The ambassadors have been super awesome with creating what Autistica Play is. Like, there's no ways I could do what I've done without the ambassadors, which was so important to set up because, you know, like they've all said, you know, it's important to have voices heard, and the voice is already here. It's just sometimes people need to make a space that's accessible for voices to be heard. So that was one of the key things for me with Autistica Play. And it's not my voice, it's their voices, and they're speaking and they're the panel. And that's what's important. Is it's all well and good us trying to make a thing, but if you don't make a thing that's inclusive of the beneficiaries and the people that you're trying to do something for, then but I mean, so that's something that for me is really important that Autistica does, is, you know, they talk with the community, they represent the community, they include the community. So for Autistica Play, that was super important. And it's just so cool to hear some of the things that they've been doing, kind of the growth that they've been going through over the last year, and the things they've done. And it's super valuable for you guys and the ones that are in chat and the ones that aren't, that may see this later. But to talk about what we're doing this month, so obviously with the changes, you know, every year there's a World Autism Awareness Month campaign. But with all the changes, the whole Autistica team kind of came together with the whole lockdown, trying to come up with something that's relevant for now, something that makes sense for now, something that autistic people that are out there that are struggling with isolation, struggling with anxiety, and kind of feeling alone, and maybe needing a bit more support, and needing an example of, you know, other autistic people and just other people at Autistica. So we've created the campaign Ways to Cope. So you can check out the hashtag. The hashtag is Ways to Cope, 2 being a number 2, Ways, WAYS, 2 number 2, Cope, COPE, and basically just people sharing how they're coping with lockdown and isolation. And on our website, you can find loads of information as well. There's a whole bunch of different resources that have been put together with the input of autistic people sharing how they're coping, resources that have been put together based on research and data. A lot of it has been done in hand with Brett as well, who's had a lot of impact in that. We spoke about it earlier today. But yeah, I'll share the links to that in the chat, and it'll also be on socials. You can obviously find it on socials. There's also resources on how autistic people can deal with coping with anxiety, and there's also resources for employers as well on how employers can understand more about what some of their neurodiverse employers might be going through, and how they can manage that effectively and be more supportive and be more understanding. Thank you. Simon in the internal chat has just given me a link to autistica.org.uk/coronavirus, which I will share in chat. There we go. So yeah, so you can find all those resources, and then just check out the hashtag online, ways to cope. And for anything games related, then the hashtag is the same as the name we've all been speaking about, which is Autistica Play.
Wonderful, perfect, cool. Well, I think we're there then. I think we've got about 6 minutes for questions. So where do we get those? Oh, there's one in the chat. Okay, cool.
And also, just for those that are watching us on Facebook, because we're not on Facebook, obviously we're on Zoom, but Simon is over there managing that chat. Just a reminder for you guys that are watching us on Facebook, please do send in your questions, and Simon will send them over to us. No worries if you don't have questions, but if you do, please do send them over. Des, back to you.
I mean, this is, it's from Sam Coleman. And is there a means of contacting the others in the chat?
Well, you could go around and kind of just say your preferred method of communication if you wanted to share your Twitter or handles or something like that, maybe.
Yeah. Sorry, Sam. Is that the question you're asking? Like, do you want our contact details? I'm not sure. Well, not mine, but like, the important people.
or it could be in the actual chat, right?
Yeah. Let us know, basically. Cool. So we've got a question here from other attendees. Personally, I don't know.
I guess that's up to Anna, actually, because the event is hosted by the BFI Certification Unit. Someone in chat is asking if there's a way that we can connect all the attendees. Let me unmute you.
Yeah. I think that's down to people giving permission for me to share their emails. So
I've got a solution.
Yeah.
Because obviously, GDPR and people's.
Well, just after earlier, I was so nervous about anything.
So I think the best thing to do is, if you do want to start a conversation, I'd suggest take it online. You could reach out on Twitter. It could be Autistica Play. You just you could use that as a way of connecting with other people. Just say, hi, I've just watched the panel. I'd like to connect. Or
hashtag it.
Yeah, hashtag it. Or you could email me or Anna and saying that you would like to connect with other people, and that way anyone that has said they want to connect with other people that were in this particular webinar, then we then have your permission to share your emails that way. Unless you had a different idea, I think that's probably the best way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, if people want to email me directly and say I'm happy to share my email with the other members, or if it's just a one-to-one, and I'll email each of them separately and just say, are you happy to be joined up together? I'm sure we all are, but
That's cool. Thanks, Anna.
I mean, on that note, I don't know how far you've got with the plans, Jake, but you were thinking of making a Discord, so potentially anyone in this, if you keep an eye on the Autistica Play hashtag, in the future, the next year, if not 2, there might be a Discord where everyone can eventually join together and be a big mesh of game enthusiasts.
I mean, that's another thing that we're looking at Autistica, is how we can create spaces where people can connect more authentically. But obviously with that, and looking at the issue that we had the first time we tried this webinar, sometimes when you open up communications, you can get people that are not there for the right reasons. And obviously when it comes to things like neurodiversity, you want to make sure that all the people that are part of the conversation are there for the right reasons. You don't want to open too many doors. You want to open the right doors. So Discord is definitely something that I would love to see, because as we all know, Discord is a fantastic platform to communicate, but it does open up a lot of accessibility for everyone. And there needs to be certain ways of moderation that we need to take into consideration before we launch something like that. But yes, thank you, Dom. There's definitely something we're looking at.
Okay, so next question is from Chris Goodyear, and his question is, how important do you think current autistic developers need to become role models? How important do you think it is?
it is missing.
Yeah.
I think
who wants to take that one?
I think because where we are, like following up from what I said earlier about representation, I think for me personally, I think it's quite important, and that's why I push myself to be open and say, you know, I'm autistic, LGBT, I'm all this, because I want people to feel as comfortable, because I'm someone who can manage my own comfort, while I know some people who don't, and I want people to know that if they feel like, oh, I'm autistic, but I don't feel there's a place for me in the games industry, I want to be that person who's like, I'm autistic, I'm in the games industry, please come chat to me, let me rob my mind of data and stuff, and I can help you. Because like, talking about my experience before, a big reason why I also wanted to join Autistica is before joining Autistica, I had a really bad work experience. Not like work experience, but employment. And I've had that twice. And I know the sensibilities of being autistic and being kind of misrepresented in the industry. However, there are so many great companies that are positively just helping anyone. But there's also, again, Autistica Play that's here to kind of be like, we're here to help, to be that support. So I think for me, it's absolutely vital, because it's a bit like, I'm going to just use a Transformers reference because I'm a massive fan. So it's being a bit like Optimus Prime, where you've got to be the leader of the Autobots to then get more Autobots to join. So there's got to be a few role models of their own volition, not forced to be a role model, but want to be a role model, to open the floor up, to allow more people to feel comfortable in themselves, and even people who are younger or older who want to join the industry and are autistic but feel uncomfortable. They need to feel that they can. So a bit like Jake said, they can go through that door and be like, let me see the wonders of this world. And, you know, I think everyone who's an ambassador, Jade, Helen, Anna, everyone else, Sue, who's in the chat, I hope still, and everyone else I could list days, we're all here to be like, we're open to it. Even like there's one ambassador called Dan Thomas who's not autistic himself, but he's so open to talk to people on the spectrum and really be there as like the kind of I want to look in your shoes kind of approach, that he's kind of made himself a subtle role model, and that's amazing as well. It's like just being open to talk about these things is needed, and I feel it is vital, and I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, I'd like to just chip in something as well. Related, I'd echo everything Dom said, but also in terms of representation, I have had at least one developer contact me privately on Twitter and say, I couldn't speak openly about being autistic in my workplace, but I'm really glad you guys are talking about it, and I'm really glad you guys are tweeting about it and being open, because that, even you just doing that, makes me feel somewhat supported, even though I don't feel like bringing it up where I work. So that's one person I've had. And other situations, face to face, I've had a couple of people that I knew previously as developers sort of opening up to me and either mentioning that they thought they were autistic or they knew they were autistic, but it wasn't a conversation we'd had previously. But because I'd come out and said, yeah, I am, and I know other people who are, my family, some people in my family are and stuff, they then felt that they could chat to me about it. And you know, it's good to have those chats, and it's good for people to feel like they can be themselves. You know, in the past and still in quite a lot of sections of society, we've been all very positive about this in this talk, but there's a lot of stigma around autism in a lot of places. Some people have extremely stereotyped ideas of what an autistic person is and what they're capable of and what challenges they have. And so a lot of people, you know, perhaps especially older people in industry, would be much more reticent to sort of stick their head above the parapet and say, actually, yeah, that's me, or yeah, that's, you know, there's a lot of parents talking about their autistic children, you know, out there, oh, my child, there's such a challenge, they do this, whatever, but it's actually quite hard for some people to come forward and say, yeah, actually, that's me as well. So the more and I don't expect everybody should have to come forward and say if they don't feel comfortable about it either. That's entirely up to them. But it's good to have a few people out there who are saying it, so they know that's a person they can talk to in confidence or bring things up with, or even just that there's someone out there sort of fighting their corner or bringing up things that are important to them.
I think that's a good moment for me to just step in with saying that I've also received private conversations from people that have said, while they themselves are not comfortable talking about it publicly, or they themselves, because maybe they're not the autistic one, it's one of their relatives or friends or something like that, but they really value the conversations that we're having and the efforts that we're trying to make change in the games industry and help the games industry become more inclusive. And it empowers them. So yeah, no, it is really important. Like, while some people are able to talk about this publicly, there are others that feel empowered by seeing those people talk about it, but they themselves don't feel safe or in a space where they're yet ready to publicly talk about it. So I think it's definitely important that those that feel empowered to continue talking about it. But I also think it's really important that when we are talking about it, we talk about it from a place of education and a place of knowledge. So that's why it's important to, for me, to come from talking from it. And I know nothing about autism research beyond what I've learned in Autistica, but obviously what I'm doing with Autistica Play, it's connected to Autistica, and Autistica have the research and the data and the information and the researchers that are doing the information behind that and researching into it. So I think it's important that these conversations happen with some either personal experience or some researched evidence behind it. I think that's the best way for us all to move forwards.
Awesome. So we've just got time for one last question.
There was one on Facebook, Des, that's posted in the comments, which is actually quite interesting.
Which one? The one from Hot Chocolate Cleo?
Jake posted it, and it's something that actually I can kind of put my 2 cents in, because I was obviously a student.
I can read it. I'm on a university degree course studying youth work.
It's not a question.
Oh no, there is a question at the bottom.
One second. So Simon, if you can hear me, the answer, Brett's very kindly put the link in at the bottom. So if you could put that on Facebook for us, that'd be great.
Okay, so Simon's not here, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There is a question in Q&A about education.
There is?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
there is.
Do you think education... Sorry, Des. Do you think education should be doing more to promote the opportunities in the industry to students with autism?
Yes. Perhaps, yes, I do. Yes.
Yes.
A resounding yes.
I mean, there is obviously a very strong link between autism and games, or in general, autism and technology. And I know from when I was studying at university, there wasn't so much of a information about job roles and job titles apart from developers and stuff, and I knew that most of the job you'd have to do as a developer or anything in the game industry is communicating and networking and going to events and traveling. And it was good because I did get to do so many opportunities. I won a sponsorship to go to GDC and Train Jam, but without the awareness and discussions about neurodiversity and some of the issues that someone who's neurodiverse would face, it becomes a challenge, to the point that what I suffered with was a complete burnout from traveling and talking to people and communicating and networking. I was like so burnt out afterwards that I didn't make a game for like almost over a year after the first game I made, because I just found it such a challenge to communicate and meet people and, you know, do all the developer stuff. Especially as I was doing it by myself. I wasn't part of a studio, it was just something I did by myself. So I think it needs to be promoted from the grassroots, from when you show interest and you go to study it, or you go to events. It needs to be something that's discussed in whatever platform, whether it's educational or otherwise, so that people are aware of the challenges that people might face if they have a disability, no matter what kind it is.
Absolutely agree. I just want to add a bit. For me, like, again, talking about Mass Effect earlier, not to go into a super long story, but along with helping me socially, it wasn't until Mass Effect that I actually discovered that you could get a job in games. And it's through my passion of Mass Effect and wanting to be in the industry that I actually did better at school. So, for example, I was targeted for an E grade in IT, and after playing Mass Effect and being like, I want to be in the games industry, I improved that to a B. So, and I actually won my school's like best improver award because of that. So I think it's absolutely vital that kids of not only uni and college, but kids in high school and primary school are told about these opportunities. Obviously, like as you go older, in more depth, but I think it's so vital because, you know, like I said, it changed my life. I was going to be a kid that would just do retail and then come back home and just play games. But, you know, I went from that kind of, and there's nothing wrong with that, absolutely not. But I think for me, I've always wanted to be proactive, and it took the opportunity of games to make me go proactive. And I think what we're seeing now are education initiatives starting up that are actually trying to get that knowledge out there to people. So just a little shout out, obviously he's not in the chat, but there's a guy called Declan who runs Into Games, which is an amazing initiative, which is basically they've got over 100 profiles of all the different types of jobs you can have in the games industry, and just listed down key facts about them. And they have a bunch of mentors on the ready to help kids just learn about the games industry and get involved. So that's one amazing initiative.
Sorry, I'm just going to have to say, I have 5 minutes before I have to then host the after party where we're going to play some games. But it's great that you mentioned Into Games, because I was chatting to Declan earlier this week, and we were chatting about how what he's creating could also be a resource and something that could help autistic people get into the games industry. So that's a very good point that you've just made. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm sure he'll be very happy to hear that we spoke about it.
And Yuki's contact for him as well. So double shout outs, but also one last shout out. Digital Schoolhouse, another great initiative. Yuki ran this time though, so biased, but I don't care. Love it. Sorry, not sorry.
Cool.
Wonderful.
Okay. So I just want to pass back over to Des to kind of round us off. And then I'm going to see whoever wants to join. I'll be over on Twitch playing the shortlist games with Chris from Payload Studios. But Des, just like to pass back to you.
Well, yeah, that was it. You know, thank you very much to Sam, Chris, and Susan for your questions. Thank you for everyone else for joining us. Basically, a massive thank you to the BFI Certification Unit for having me and hosting the whole thing.
Cheers, Des.
Much love. And yeah, and then thank you very much to the awesome panelists, Helen Carmichael, Dominic Shaw, Dr. Brett Heasman, and Jade
Hall-Smith.
There we go. Almost there.
It's all right.
Almost contact memory. I'm getting old.
You're not as old as me, mate.
Just lastly, for everyone else on the stream, I guess, is everyone on Twitter? Is that the easiest way to get hold of everybody? So if we just round up everyone, just blurting your Twitter handles out. If anyone wants to follow up and get some advice, that would be grand.
Yeah, sure. I'll probably post mine in the thing because it's probably complicated to remember my handle. So I'll post it.
Yeah, I put mine in the chat as well, in the Zoom chat. So you're welcome to share.
But for the people that may watch this at a later point and don't have access to the chat, just can everyone just list off verbally, and hopefully those people that are watching, if the automated subtitles on the platform don't get it right, hopefully they can guess what we're going to say. So I'll go first and I'll try and pronounce it. Mine is at Level Up Jake.
Okay, mine is at Variegated Games.
Mine is at BC Heather, which doesn't make much sense. It does to me, but
mine is at Dominic Shaw 94.
Easy.
Mine is. Oh, sorry.
You go, Anna.
Thank you, Brett. At Anna Mancy BFI.
Yeah, I tried writing mine out, but it's no clearer. It's at Brett_Heasman.
Brilliant.
And Des?
Good. And then yeah, I'm at Kid Desimo for all your very boring and grumpy game production needs. And yeah, well that's it really. And I just wanted to end with a shout out back to Helen. Good luck on next Thursday, the 9th of April, for Ancient Enemy.
Yes, please
Yeah.
make Ancient
Good
Enemy,
luck.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Cool.
you all for
Thank you, everyone.
joining. I really appreciate it.
Bye.
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 Guys.
Bye.
Have a good weekend. Stay safe.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.